Why do certain moments trigger you so strongly? Why do the same patterns keep repeating? And how can you begin to break free? Welcome to What Triggers You with Stacy Pelletieri. Each week, one listener question unpacked with compassion, clarity, and practical tools for change.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to What Triggers You. I'm Stacy Pelletieri, licensed clinical social worker, trauma therapist, and your host. On this podcast, we explore trauma, triggers, and the ways our past experiences continue to shape our present. Some episodes feature anonymous guests sharing their personal stories, while others bring in experts to discuss topics that intersect with trauma, healing, relationships, mental health, and human behavior. My goal is simple: to help you better understand yourself and the people around you. I'm excited for today's guest. Today, we are joined by Emma Bennett, a licensed clinical social worker and therapist, specializing in supporting new and expecting mothers. She has been practicing in Los Angeles since 2017, helping women navigate the emotional complexities of pregnancy, postpartum adjustment, and the transition into motherhood. Before entering private practice, she spent 5 years working with parents and children throughout Los Angeles, gaining extensive experience in child and family mental health. Her work is grounded in both clinical expertise and deep understanding of the challenges families face during life's major transitions. She currently lives in Manhattan Beach with her husband and 2 children, ages 6 and 9. Through her professional experience and her own journey as a mother, she is passionate about helping women feel supported, understood, and empowered as they build the kind of motherhood experience they want for themselves and their families. So I am definitely excited to talk to you. Welcome. Thank you for being here to speak with me and to speak to our guests.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here too.
Yeah. So where can we dive in? Tell us a little bit about the work you do.
Yeah. So, like my bio mentioned, I have been working with mothers since 2017 in private practice. But before then, I was working with women and mostly mothers and children in more of a family therapy setting in Los Angeles through school-based work. And I loved that. It was really fulfilling. When I became pregnant with my first daughter and then eventually went on to have her, I really felt like my interest shifted to wanting to focus on the mother specifically. I definitely felt personally inspired because even though I was a therapist, even though I had a lot of tools and resources and support around me, I felt like there were so many things that I was experiencing and that friends of mine were experiencing in new motherhood that just really needed to be talked about more. And I felt like there was a bit of a gap in services in my area, at least around, moms who are also clinicians kind of walking through the same stage of life. So shortly after I had my daughter, I spent about a year diving into lots of different clinical trainings and a mentorship, and really decided to begin working with moms. And I've been doing it ever since. It's amazing work and it's incredibly fulfilling. And it's such a gift to be able to help women, through some of these stages in the very beginning that can feel really overwhelming and isolating.
Yeah, it really is very, very important work. And I'd like to really dive into what you're noticing the trends are, where the gaps are, because I'll just say very briefly, my oldest is 25.
Mm-hmm.
So I became a new mom 25 years ago. And I will tell you that within the first couple of years of being a mom, I noticed the same thing. I noticed a lot of gaps in services for new mothers and older mothers as well. I noticed that in general, there were not a lot of services and supports for mothers, and that there were a lot of mental health issues showing up that were very unique to motherhood. I even tried to start a few businesses around it. I started a brand called Parents Are People, and I started a wellness center called Club Mom that all really focused in on the gaps I was seeing. So I guess what I'm curious about is here we are 25 years later,
Yeah.
and we are on opposite sides of the country. I'm in New York, right? You're in California. And so I would love to understand, what has changed over the last 25 years? Has anything changed? And
Right.
what more can we do about it? So please tell me. I'd love to kind of really hear, what do you see showing
Yeah.
up?
Well, I think the good news is, I'll start with the good, is
Yeah.
there has been so much more destigmatization around postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety than even when I was first opening up my practice. I think, social media, while there's a lot of things that can be triggering about it, I do think that more and more women are being outspoken about their experiences, which has been very helpful. But about 9 years ago, when I started my practice, there was a lot of pretending still happening around the sort of myths of enjoying every minute of it, and this idea that moms have to do it all, and sort of this, you know, over functioning, or what, I'm hearing a lot right now of the buzzword like optimizing in motherhood was sort of the gold standard. And couple that with all these other pressures that we feel right now with, having a career and breastfeeding exclusively and all of these things that I think, uniquely impact moms right now. It was important for me to dig into that a little bit more. I'm not sure what you felt were the unique challenges 25 years ago, but what I still see is like common themes of, being a martyr in motherhood, sort of this myth that you can have it all and do it seamlessly. There's also so much pressure to be up to date on all the parenting strategies while also taking care of yourself, while also nurturing your marriage, or, navigating friendships. So I think that there are consistent themes that probably resonate with you too. But I will say, since beginning this work 9 years ago, I am really happy to see more people talking about this, because when I was a new mom, it still felt like saying that you had postpartum depression or postpartum anxiety was like a personality issue or something that was, a flaw of yours, rather than something that you were experiencing that was, a cluster of symptoms that were not that are not your fault and don't indicate you being a not good enough mom.
Yeah, it is amazing that we have definitely grown a lot in the last 20 years in terms of the conversation, and it being less stigmatized, and us really normalizing it. And that is definitely progress for sure. I definitely was seeing the same things. I think the word that really sticks out for me, when I think back to what I was working with at the time as a clinician, and what I'm hearing when I hear you talk is shame. There's pressure, expectation, and shame. I think
Mm-hmm.
those are really the three things that I think as women, as
Yeah.
mothers, that we're dealing with, right?
Yep.
I
Mm-hmm.
think the expectation, I think, is generational. When we talk about generational trauma, I
Mm-hmm.
think especially as the woman, I think women really have we've been through the ringer, over the
Mm-hmm.
last few hundred years or so, or more, since the dawn
Uh-huh.
of time.
Uh-huh.
There's expectation on us,
Oh yeah.
right? We are the caretakers, we are the nurturers, we are the ones who are supposed to do all the things and be there for all the people. And I think that, what really kind of like spells it out best, I think, is this whole concept of like, the airplane, like you put the oxygen mask over your own face before you put it over the face of your children that you're taking care of, because if you're not okay, then they're not okay. And that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
But what bothers me about that, and
Mm-hmm.
I think this is really where we struggle as women and as mothers, is why can't we just put the oxygen mask on because we need oxygen? Why are we only putting the oxygen mask on so that we can be okay for everybody else? That's the messaging we get, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't take
Mm-hmm.
care of yourself, then you're not going to be okay for everyone else. I remember when I was a young mother, And I was struggling with guilt, mommy guilt, right? Like I work, so therefore I should feel ashamed because I'm a working mother and I leave my children all day to
Yep.
go into the office and be a therapist and be a clinician and help other people. So that means at night and on the weekend, I have to be with my children all the time. Otherwise, I'm a bad mother and I'm doing
Yeah.
something wrong because I've
Totally.
left them during the day. Right. And so, what helped me, what moved me into this space where I would allow myself to go on a date with my husband or go out with my friends and have a girls' night was people would say to me, well, Stacy, if you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be okay for your kids. So then it was like, oh, all right, I could go out with my friends because it's good for my children.
Yes.
I was not getting this messaging back then that I should go out with my friends because it was good for me. And that was enough.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I think that the oxygen mask analogy is something that I think is so widely, talked about. But I
Yeah.
agree with you. I think that it's important to understand that not everything you do needs to be of service to someone else as a mom. As a woman, we have so many different facets to ourselves. And, when we do things, outside of working and parenting, it's okay for it to just feel good. I mean, I will say an indirect consequence for the better is you're more grounded and you can feel like yourself. But I do think there's something to be said about, not only subscribing to, okay, like I have to do this in order to be a better blah, blah, blah. I think it's good to just be like, I'm going to go out with my girlfriends. It's going to feel really great. And I deserve that. I do think that it's interesting that you're saying,
Mhm.
if I understand correctly, that sometimes even the messaging of why we're doing self-care can be because we need to do it to be a better mother. While that might be true, and I do think that there is a lot of truth to that, I also think it's
Mhm.
important to remember, like, you can just do it to do it, and it can feel really good.
Yes. Yes, both are important. It is
Yeah.
important to take care of yourself so that you can't help it. You want to help your children or your husband or your elderly parents, whoever it is that you're taking care of. Of course, you have to take care of yourself to be the best version of yourself to show up for them, right? You can't be there for others if you can't take care of yourself and nurture yourself and know what you need. 100% that's true. But I definitely feel there's a lot of messaging that's missed,
Mhm.
right? And I think that comes from this feeling of shame that women tend to have when we do allow ourselves to take care of ourselves just for the sake of taking care of ourselves and not doing it in service to others.
Absolutely. I mean, I think of this one example of when I was a new mom, and I had a really hard time firsthand allowing myself space and not feeling the guilt after,
Mhm.
So the first time my husband took my daughter for like a day all by himself, which is
Mhm.
completely great and normal, by the way, I felt so disoriented that instead of doing something for myself, I cleaned my whole house. I went to Bye Bye Baby. I built one of those push cars for my daughter. And then by the end of that day, and they came back, I didn't feel fulfilled. I felt tired and depleted because I wasn't quite sure how to reclaim time for myself in a way that felt, authentic. And I was wrestling with that shame. And, I worked on that in my own individual therapy. I also read a lot and was truly inspired by that day to figure out ways to not only help myself reclaim time and figure out how to release guilt and really understand why that might even be there in the first place, to also help other moms. And I'm happy to report the next time my husband took my daughter for a day, I went out with friends, had brunch, and we got ear piercings, and we had the best time. And I didn't feel guilt about that at all.
Yeah, I love that you shared that story because you had that aha moment, that pivotal moment of realizing that you started to experience that loss of self. And that's what I think a lot of mothers experience because there is that, generational trauma and societal pressure and expectation that when we have children, our children become number one, which I agree with, they should, but we take ourselves off the priority list completely, and we're not even on it. We're not number 2, 3, or 4, or 5. We're just not even there anymore. And so when we are really doing everything in service to others, we do lose touch with, what do I want to do with my free time that's about me? And we don't even know what to do. And then if we were to find something to do, it's exactly what you said. It's that guilt or that shame, right? Is it okay for me to spend the day doing something that's just about me that does not benefit anybody else? What does that say about me as a mother, that I could have spent the day with my baby, but instead I went and got my nails done, or I went and played pickleball with my best friend because I really like it, right? When I could have cleaned my daughter's room, or I could have gone food shopping, or I could have been productive and done something that is helpful for everybody else. And when you have that moment, when you realize, I've disconnected from myself. Not only do I not know what I want to do with my free time, but even if I did do that, I'd feel guilty.
Yeah.
And when we feel guilty, we have to ask ourselves, what is our values? Because guilt is about value. If you feel guilty, what you're basically saying is, doing this goes against my values. So if you're saying doing something for me just because goes against your values, then you do need to ask the next question, which is what you said, right? Where does this come from in the first place? Why do I think I'm not entitled to do something for myself? Where does that value come from? And
Right.
sometimes we really need to kind of like dig through that and get to the root of it, to say, why am I not giving myself permission to get my nails done or play pickleball or stare at the wall if that's what I want to do?
That's right. That's right. I love that you bring that up, because I do think it is important to do some of that inward questioning of like, whose voice is that? What's contributing to this? How long has this been around chirping at you? And why is it so loud right now? And how can we try to understand it better in order to meet it with compassion and reorient ourselves in our values, so that we can, kind of work alongside that guilt and dismantle it? I think that's incredibly important. And we can't do that unless we look inward and understand where it might originate from, or where it originates from in several different sources and stages of our life that could be contributing to how it shows up in motherhood.
Yeah. I'll share my pivotal moment with you. I might cry.
Oh,
Just
love tears.
giving you
There's
a
just
warning.
communication. I love it.
And it was so long ago, but it's still so triggering for me. I think it was, my daughter had just started, I guess, preschool. So my daughter's younger than my son. So I had my son first.
Okay.
And then when he was 2 years and 9 months old, I gave birth to my daughter. So it was like I had my son, and then my son finally started going to school, but then I had my daughter at home. And then by the time my daughter finally started going to school, I had now been just like with a baby at home and not really had time for myself for so many years, where the only time I wasn't with them was when I was working. I was either working or with my babies.
Yep.
And so now she got on the bus, and I was like, oh, hallelujah. This is the greatest day ever. I have a day to myself. I took the day off from work because I was going to rejoice in this special day.
Sure.
Where both of my kids were at school and I had a few hours to myself. And I was like, I'm not going to feel guilty because they're at school. I didn't leave them. They left me. So this in my brain somehow gave me permission. I was now going to be able to do what I wanted to do because I wasn't going to feel guilty about it. Right?
It's so interesting how the motherhood math is mathing there.
It's so crazy, right? So toxic to me what I did. So my daughter gets on the bus, and I went back up to the front door, and I started to feel a little bit weird, got a little anxious. And so I sat down on the stoop of outside my house. And I was like, so what am I doing today? And I sat there until she came home.
Oh my gosh.
Not
It gave
good.
me chills. I know. It gives me chills just because it's such an illustration. I mean, I would love to hear what was going through your head, if anything, in that moment, and what you think about it now upon reflection. But I get chills because I've heard so many versions of that, and my heart just like I want to go up to you and hug you at that time,
I'll fly
Yeah.
across the country so you can give me a hug. So these are the women you help, right?
Yeah.
You're helping that mother that's sitting on her stoop for 3 hours, right? So excited to embark on this day of self-love. And I realized it's been so
Mm-hmm.
many years since I've actually allowed myself to really do anything for myself. I was so disconnected, where it was all about taking care of my children or working or taking care of my house. I
Yeah.
was just in this phase of doing for everybody. And I was like, if I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to do something for me, what is it going to be? And I froze,
Yeah.
literally froze. So how would you help me? I come to you. This is what I tell you. How do you
Yeah.
help me?
I mean, first and foremost, I would validate and normalize your experience. I mean, if you
Mm-hmm.
haven't tended to yourself as an individual for years, of course, it's hard to know what to do with yourself in that moment. I also think it would be important to explore some of that ambivalence that probably was happening on that porch. It's that kind of relief, but heartbreak
Okay.
in knowing that now you do have some space for yourself, but then that also means your child is individuating a little bit that day. And so there can be a lot of feelings there. I work on that a lot with moms and really trying to process those opposing feelings that can happen at the same time. And how can we, I mean, it's so much there, I would say, with like that maternal ambivalence in different stages of life. But how can we allow those feelings to be there and also try to pick something that may feel good, that day or the next time drop off happens and you have a day to yourself without having the pressure that it has to be some sort of transformational back to myself event, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think what I've learned is in coming back to myself and really reestablishing, that part of me that's an individual, I have tried different things on as to what feels good when I am just taking care of me. I've taken adult piano lessons. I've gone on trips with friends. I've done my own therapy. I've done acupuncture. I've joined a tennis team. And, not all of those have been the thing that feels really aligned with what I want to do, but it's been really interesting to allow myself the permission to try things on. So, normalizing those feelings would be
Mm-hmm.
really important, validating, and also kind of doing some psychoeducation around that maternal ambivalence that I'm talking about. And then inviting you to just try things on, and see what feels resonant in reestablishing who you are now. Because you're not who you were before you had kids, but there's parts of you that probably enjoy some of the same things that you did before, but it
Mm-hmm.
may look different now, and that's okay. And how do we allow ourselves the courage to explore that and really putting that guilt in check if it shows up?
Yeah, I think, what really stands out for me is that point where you say it didn't have to be an event,
Mhm.
right? And I think that's sort of what I did. That's the mistake that I made that day, was that I was like, this is going to be an event. I'm going to do something transformational. I'm going to really connect with myself and do something for me. And I think it had to be so big and grand in my head because I had allowed so much time to go by without doing it, that I was really looking for what is that thing that really is going to connect me to myself. And when I couldn't find this big thing, I was just so lost and disappointed. But I think I also started to grieve, right? I think what triggered for me there that day was that there was a part of myself that really wasn't there anymore, that I had
Mm.
changed, that I was different. And so maybe, you know, 9 years ago or however many years ago it was, I can't do math at the moment. It was that I first had my son, and now, here we are. And, it's, this moment where I finally get time to myself. It is okay to grow and change in 6 years or 9 years or 8 years or whatever, how many years it is. change happens. And when you become a parent, there are definitely going to be different values that you start to have, different interests, different things that are important. And I think I was trying so hard to connect with who I was before I
Mhm.
became a mother that I wasn't allowing myself to say, who is Stacy today?
Mm.
What does Stacy want to do today? And I was really trying to make it too much of an event to connect with the Stacy of 9 years ago. And
Yeah.
Stacy had been through and changed so much over the years. And I think that in that moment, the trigger point for me was grief. I am
Yeah.
not the same person anymore. And maybe that could be okay.
Yeah, I think so. I think that you can acknowledge the loss of
Hmm.
who you were, but then you can think of it as a restoration of who you want to be now. I think it's always important to continue to get to know ourselves. And, we change at so many points in our lives if we allow ourselves to. And so having curiosity and trying different things that may feel good can help you reconnect with yourself instead of trying to force something that, was more representative of a different phase of your life.
Yeah. And I like the suggestion you give about like little exposures, right? Like you might try something and not like it, and that's okay.
Hmm.
But just, make a list of things you'd like to try. Try a
Hmm.
piano lesson, right? Try pickleball. Try getting your nails done. Try a new food. Try a cooking
Yeah.
class,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Whatever it is, whatever. Try taking a walk in a place you've never been,
Right.
right? It doesn't
You
have
know,
to be a grand thing.
exactly. Exactly. It doesn't have to be a trip to, a different part of the world with your friends or by yourself on like an eat,
Hmm.
pray, love journey or anything like that.
Right.
Dr. Becky once referenced how sometimes taking self-care for moms or looking at different things that might feel good is like being starving and looking at a humongous menu and just feeling really overwhelmed with all the options and scared that the one thing that you're going to pick is going to taste like shit and you don't want to eat it or something. And I really liked that analogy because she's like, just pick something. And if you don't like it, you can try something else. And you're going to get hungry again. So you're going to need to eat again. And then you can order a different item off the menu. So trying to not put so much pressure on yourself too to have, like I said, a transformative experience with each pocket of time you might have to take care of yourself, and instead be curious and be a bit of a researcher. How did I feel after that? Do I want to do that again? Was that, something that brought me joy? And I think that's really important too. It's a way to reclaim also like listening to your needs and how you're feeling.
Yeah, I think that, when we really sort of lean into this idea that we're going to give ourselves time for this, we have to remember, like what you said, like there's going to be another opportunity. If you try something today and you don't like it, then there's going to be the next time, right? Like it's not your last meal. It's not like if you eat this and you don't like it, you're going to starve, right? Which
Mhm.
means we have to allow this space for the next time,
That's right.
right?
That's
We
right.
can't just give ourselves all right, this is your one shot to have 3 hours to yourself, right? It's something that we have to allow and make room for in our lives on a more regular basis.
I agree. And I think that that can also stand for if you set up childcare and it goes miserably when you're trying to take care of yourself. This is a common pitfall that I'll see with moms where they go through all the effort of either having a family member watch their child or a childcare provider or their partner, and then they'll finally go and take some time for themselves. And lo and behold, 10, 15, however long into their self care, they get called incessantly by whoever's watching their child, and they have to come home and help work the kinks out of whatever is going on with the baby. And that can lead to feeling really discouraged to take time
Mm.
for yourself again. But I think it's important to look at that as some frustration tolerance for everybody. The baby is learning to be taking care of other people. You're learning to sit with the discomfort of it may not be smooth sailing when you are having someone else watch your child. And whoever is taking care of the baby is also on a bit of a runway to reaching cruising altitude. So it is going to be turbulent, and that does not mean that you are not supposed to be taking time for yourself. It means that you're in some of that adjustment phase. And I think it's motivating to do it again, to see if it's going to go smoother. You have to push through that discomfort. So that's another thing that I'll see a lot, in addition to maybe not feeling as though like the, choice you made for self-care really scratched the itch.
Yeah. I wonder if there's like this, it's really trending right now in our society. I think a lot of it has to do with technology and social media and things like that. But there's like this push for perfectionism and, less and less tolerance for discomfort, where we feel like, we're supposed to do everything right. And if I leave for a couple of hours and I come home and now my baby's nap schedule is off, or they haven't eaten, or all these things, this means I've done something wrong, or things are off. So I forget it. I'm just not going to do this anymore. I feel like we're not good as humans at allowing or giving the message to ourselves and others that like perfectionism is not real. And it is okay to sit with and tolerate discomfort, or, just acknowledge that nothing is going to always be smooth.
Right.
Right. And that it is important for children to be frustrated or uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right. We're not doing something wrong to our child, regardless of how old they are, if we allow them to experience any adversity at all, even if it's having to wait to eat, or not having the most comfortable nap, or having their schedule be off, or being sad because they miss you for a few hours. Right. These things are actually okay and a really crucial part of development, right? We develop experientially. Your children develop experientially, and they're not going to be able to deal with shifts or flexibility if we can't deal with shifts and flexibility. We all have to be able to experience that and be okay and come out the other side of it.
I think that's so true. And I think for new moms, what I often see, and what I certainly experienced myself, was rigidity, because when you finally have any semblance of predictability, it's really easy to get attached to it, right?
Yeah.
So
we want more control, right?
Yeah. So wanting to control because it helps you feel more regulated, in order to not feel as overwhelmed when you have a consistent schedule, makes a lot of sense. And also having some variation so that you can go experience things that truly give you joy, that may disrupt your day-to-day routine, are also important to do for a couple reasons. A, you want to go have fun with your friends. And if your baby is going to come with you and maybe have a not so great beach nap when you're out with your friends enjoying the beach this summer, I could understand how that could make a mom decide to not go and then instead stay home and remain isolated. But I do think it's important to challenge that a little bit and be like, okay, well, what's the worst thing that happens if they have a crap nap at the beach? Maybe it will be one rough night, but you can reestablish that rhythm the next day. And maybe the baby will get used to having a little bit of change of pace, for the nap. And this is something I honestly encounter more with firstborns versus second and third, et cetera, because the flexibility has to happen with, second, third, et cetera, time moms. But, I do think that it is important to look at that perfectionism and rigidity. Why is it there in the first place? How can we test it a little bit? Because I do think that is a big barrier as well for, moms to take care of themselves. It's that grip of control and rigidity that helps them feel safe, but then it can perpetuate some isolation, some social withdrawal, and overall functioning, really.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, since I know we don't have a lot of time left, are there other things that you notice that come up, or things that come up in your work with mothers that you want to bring up that you think is important for us to talk about today?
Yeah, I think that, something that I really like to instill in my practice is self-compassion for new moms and for mothers in general. I do, talking and expanding a bit about the perfectionism that shows up in motherhood. I feel like that's rampant. I think that our culture values, perfectionism and overworking and being highly efficient and highly productive. A lot of the clients that I work with are high achievers and are used to doing it all. And, perfectionism is certainly something that is a common theme. So I think that, really working on loosening the grip of the perfectionism and understanding where it originates from and challenging it with compassion when it's not possible to do things perfectly in motherhood is something that I'm super passionate about. It's been something that I've really worked on in my motherhood journey and continue to. I often say that lowering expectations on yourself is 100% a great self-care strategy because it is, it's important, it's vital. And, I think that self compassion is something that we can tap into in motherhood, and we should, because not only does it help us, it also helps our kids. So if we can show them that imperfection and, doing the best that we can, but not to a point where we are suffering is healthy. And also, forgiving ourselves when we mess up in front of our kids is not only important for us to internalize, but it's important for them too as well. So in my practice, while I am working individually with moms, my hope is that we're breaking cycles that we've held on to from our own childhood or our own upbringing that can spill over into our children's generations so that they can be more compassionate towards themselves. So they strive and work hard, but they also can sit with the fact that there's no perfect way of doing things. And that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with them.
So what do you think, what kind of past experiences and traumas do you see mothers tend to bring into their new experiences being mothers and the need for perfectionism? What, just for our listeners who are listening that might hear this and think, is this what's happening to me? I'm wondering if we can maybe give an example or two of what that might look like so that they can really piece that together and really start to maybe be a little bit of more aware of their own triggers and what they might be bringing in from past experiences that can spill over into motherhood and the pressure, the expectation, the perfectionism that they're bringing into this that is really making it so hard for them.
Yeah, something that I like to reflect on with clients is, how did this come to be in the first place? I think of it as an adaptation. So if you are someone who's prone to perfectionism, it's there for a reason, and it was there for a good reason, honestly, because as a child, you're trying to maintain safety, emotional safety in your family of origin. So being a perfectionist and performing in a certain way did you some good, and it's one of those coping strategies that isn't frowned upon by society. And oftentimes it's really rewarded, right? So, those who are top of their class or on the honor roll in childhood and then are the easy child or the good girl, we can look at that and be like, okay, it felt good to be achieving, but maybe there were things that weren't getting tended to, or maybe there was a fear of failure for a reason. So those are common things that I like to explore with clients to understand why the perfectionism is there in the first place. What is it protecting? What did you learn about how love shows up as a child that kind of, siloed you into this space of having to be a certain way? And so that I find incredibly interesting. And everyone's story is different, but that is a theme that I can see, and I love to dig into. So if that resonates to your listeners, I do think it is important to explore it further. I think that there's a lot of interesting research on perfectionism and, sort of these emotional internalizer type children. And that's something that I love talking about in my practice.
Yeah. A theme I've seen show up over the years so many times when new mothers, they sometimes come into treatment in crisis. I was okay. And then I had children. And ever since I had children, I have OCD. or I have this anxiety, or, I'm always worried about this, or I can't stop ruminating about something happening. I had it a little bit as a child and then it went away. And now here it is again. What is it about having
Mm.
children that has triggered this? And so I think it is important, for our listeners to know that it is not uncommon for becoming a mother, the idea of being a mother, the idea of being a parent. And sometimes this is true for fathers as well, not always mothers. Becoming a parent can trigger unresolved things that we
Mhm.
may be carrying from our childhood. And sometimes it may have to do with your mother, your father. What was your experience like with your caretakers? And if you didn't have a good role model, for whatever reason, because they weren't there, there was abandonment or neglect, or there was abuse, and now you're in the role of the parent and you have to figure out how to be a different parent. Sometimes that can really trigger, right, this need for control and this need to
Yeah.
be perfect. And you're so hard on yourself and you won't
Mhm.
forgive or allow any mistakes,
Yeah.
because any mistake you make, you're going to compare yourself. Am I like my mother? Am
Right.
I like my father? And so you really don't allow yourself to be human in those situations. And that can really become so toxic.
I think that's why it is so helpful to work with a therapist about this stuff, because I think that when you start to realize, oh my gosh, here's some patterns that are showing up for me, and then you get almost like paralyzed and like, I don't want to be like my parents, but I also don't know how to be a mom now without beating myself up with this inner critic every time I make a mistake. I think
Mhm.
that is something that our generation is really working through. And we have all this information now. We have so many coping strategies at our fingertips through experts and so much research that wasn't available to our parents. But we also are scared to mess up. So it's sort
Yeah.
of an over rotation in a way. And I think what's really beneficial of working with a professional through this is teasing those out and understanding that there can be a happy medium here. You can have some of that information, but you still can show up authentically as yourself. And if you do something that is reminiscent of your parents on their worst days, guess what? Every parent is going to make mistakes. It doesn't mean that you're repeating history. You still can work on reparenting yourself, but it's gradual and it's messy and there's no way to do it perfectly. So, it's interesting that you bring that up, because I feel like, it's almost like when you get exposed to some of this stuff, it can feel really overwhelming. So, you don't have to navigate it alone. And I think it's really helpful to walk that path with someone who's, well trained and understands and can help you tease it apart.
Yes, I think the fact that therapy has become so normalized and mainstream, and there's so many of us out there now that really want to partner with you and help you in this journey, take us up on that. We're here.
Mhm.
So if somebody is looking for somebody like you, like yourself, and they really do want somebody who really understands and knows how to navigate them through all of these things that we're talking about today, what should they be looking for? Where do they begin to know, is this the right fit for me and a therapist?
Yeah. So I like to suggest reaching out to the other providers and support people in your community who have a lot of experience working with moms. They say OBs are a nice re- referral resource. They tend to have, preferred partners that are working with them, or your local mommy and me group. And I would say look for clinicians who do specialize in motherhood, because there are so many nuances to it that sometimes I will receive clients who have worked with therapists who don't necessarily specialize. And it is such a sensitive and vulnerable time in life that I think it is important to work with someone who does it regularly and understands, like I said, the nuances. And then, I do think that when you are looking for a therapist, the vibe is super important, right? So if you're talking to a therapist in a consultation and you feel uncomfortable, it may not be the right fit for you. So I like to consider it like interviewing for someone who you're going to spill your guts to. You want to get off the call and be like, okay, like, how's my body feeling? How am I feeling right now in my nervous system? Like, do I look forward to talking to that person again? Because, research shows that above all else, the relationship is most important in order to make meaningful change in therapy. And I truly believe that too. So vibes are super key as well.
Oh my gosh, 100%. I can't stress enough. People, I cannot stress enough how important the relationship is in the therapy. That is number one. The most important part of the healing journey is the relationship. And I know this is a totally different topic, but I'm going to plug it every opportunity I can. This is why chatbots and AI cannot be your therapist, because you cannot really have a true healing relationship with technology.
Mm-hmm.
We need a person. We need people.
Nothing feels quite as transformative as sitting in a space with someone and feeling accepted and listened to and held in an emotional space.
It is what it's all about. It's really an amazing journey. So if anybody is listening to this and thinking maybe, if you even think maybe, then yes, the answer is yes. Find your person. Find your person. It really can be so helpful. So before we close out for today, is there anything that you really wanted to be able to bring up or say that we didn't get to that you want to just mention really quick before we close out?
I don't think so, unless there's anything else you want me to touch on. Yeah.
No, the only other thing I would want to really ask is for our listeners, if they want to learn more about you or connect with you or reach out to you or have you be their therapist, what's a good way for them to reach out and find you?
Yeah, so my website is therapyfornewmoms.com, spelled just like it sounds. And on Instagram, I am Therapy with Emma, but 3 M's, not 2. And yeah, reach out to me if you have any questions. And I am just so grateful that I got to be here today with you.
I'm so grateful that you came. This was a great conversation. And I know for sure that if anyone is listening to this and feeling any of these feelings, this is going to be helpful. No doubt. So I'm really glad we had this conversation. Thank all of you for listening. If you think this would be helpful for someone you know, please share it with them. And I will see you next time.
You've been listening to What Triggers You with Stacy Pelletieri. For more information or to apply to be on the show, visit whattriggersyou.com. If this episode resonated with you, be sure to listen, like, and subscribe. Until next time.